Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the panel to enable digital transformation with IoT. We have a very esteemed panel here from all the way from Dell, from Garrett, and Deloitte. Let's begin by having the speakers introduce themselves by tell us about which part of company you are in and how is that part of company working on IoT. Maybe we'll go.
Sure. So Jason Shepard, actually represent Dell Technologies. So this is the portfolio, Dell EMC, of course, but then also VMware, Pivotal, RSA, SecureWorks, VirtuStream. So 7 businesses across the portfolio. My role from an IoT standpoint, really, kind of broadly speaking, edge. Is as CTO is how does this thing really scale over time? So we've been looking a lot at how the market's been evolving. We've been driving a lot of industry efforts, which I'm sure we'll chat a bit about. And actually, the last conversation, if any of you guys were in the room for the last one, there was a lot of talk about trust. This has been a big thing that we've been working on lately, and I'd love to touch on in this conversation. But really, it's not, rule number 1: help or get out of the way when there's revenue potential. Rule number 2 is help this thing actually scale.
Hello, I'm Zoe Alexeeva. I work for Garrett Motion, which is formerly known as Honeywell Technologies. And of course, for us, IoT and digital transformation is a way to transform our company to become a leader and also a trusted partner in digital era for our customers, to make us more customer-centric and also achieve operational excellence and digital business growth.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is André Barneveld-Binkhuizen. I work at Deloitte, Deloitte Consulting to be specific. I'm actually solely working for the manufacturing industry, broad manufacturing from chemicals, oil and gas to discrete production. And I have the honor actually to lead and coordinate our Industry 4.0 activities here in EMEA.
Thank you. So there's a lot of buzz about the term digital transformation, and there's even a book written with the same title. So let's hear from the panelists, maybe in the reverse order. How do you or your company defines digital transformation?
So, Chaim, Deloitte looks at digital transformation as a way to make our clients' business future-proof. That is really central to what we see as part of digital transformation. From there are actually 3 themes that are really relevant, and one is the digital strategy, because even though we really simulate and encourage people to bottom up go and experiment, you need a digital strategy. You need to understand where the value is for your company and what business models eventually will be enabled through IoT or other digital technologies. The second part is the experience. So some of our manufacturing clients, although customer is not their biggest concern, experience especially, going into a new business model, moving away from a product to a service, will actually mean that the experience is becoming important to you. And the third one is actually the transformation at the core. So this is all around your manufacturing, your operations, the way you do design of your products, all the way into delivery, fulfillment, including supply chain. So those 3, and they can be relevant. They differ in relevance depending on the client you are. But those 3 things we see back, and that's how we see actually digital transformation. Now there's the process in time. So you start experimenting, you start doing, but at the end of the day, you want to be digital. And that's a long journey. And that's part of the transformation as well. Actually, we look at the roadmap and building capabilities at our clients to have them actually be digital.
Okay, I think that's very well said. You said future-proof the business. Not too long ago, I had hosted a Silicon Valley the trip of a company which is 100 years old, France-based, and makes industrial gases. So they brought their C-level suite for a Silicon Valley trip. And what they told me is they're not afraid today of their traditional competitors, but it is the non-traditional competitors. Just like the Marriotts and Hiltons of the world today are afraid of Airbnb more than the other hotel chain. So I think leveraging digital transformation for future-proofing their business, that's a very important aspect, and that was the reason that this team came from friends to visit Silicon Valley and see how they can embrace technologies which can help them do that. Let's move on to Zoya for your definition of digital transformation.
Yes, thank you. I agree with Andre and Shyam. So of course it's a way to make company future-proof. And I would also take it from three perspectives, just like Andre. I would say for us, digital transformation consists of three parts. First, it's internal transformation, how to make our own company more efficient, more customer-centric. So making, for example, integrating various IT systems to be able to have end-to-end traceability, to be able to share the data with our suppliers, etc. It's not only helping to reduce operational costs or have a higher quality production, it also helps advance to have faster innovation cycles and better customer experience. The second point is external view on digital transformation. So of course it's digital business growth. It is transitioning from classical hardware-based product business towards software and service-based business. And at Garrett Motion we already have some software-based portfolios such as cybersecurity for connected vehicles, etc. And finally, the third take is innovation, and I really would like to highlight it because digital transformation of internally, externally, no matter what, it's really requiring to incorporate innovation, continuous innovation into all your processes, internal processes, external product development processes. You have to enable your own people to be able to be ready for all the changes that are coming to them and to be able to innovate with a new pace. So I would really like to emphasize that it's really important to make people in the organization kind of change agents to be able to drive this forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, really good definitions and models, and so digital transformation. I mean, in a nutshell, it's how can I use technology to help improve things, but then also stay ahead of my competition. And you talk about IoT. I mean, IoT is types of connected systems, delivering data. Of course, there's a new trend with the analytics associated with it, but I would say IoT is actually more about the maker movement than it is actually about cheaper sensors or rise of the cloud or connectivity or whatever, edge computing, whatever. This notion of new companies coming in and changing how business is done, being willing to do things in new ways, new price points. I mean, look what Uber did to taxis in about 6 months, and Airbnb, what's changing it. And so digital transformation is really about getting people to kind of look at stuff with a new perspective. And it's actually, in many cases, you mentioned the innovation and whatnot, it's actually, in many cases, more about people than it is about technology. It's this inertia. The last conversation was about IT-OT convergence and whatnot. People are your greatest and most variable asset. And so a lot of digital transformation revolves around this notion of trust across your people. But also it revolves around, stop being your own worst enemy. The old Innovators Dilemma, notion, if I can just do what I've always done better, I can succeed. No, you actually have to change and look at the market in a new way and pivot. I talk with a lot of people. In my role, we work with a lot of great people across the industry, and Innovators Dilemma is a very real thing. We all have a little bit of it in our own companies. A story. So I was on the phone with one of the big payments providers about a year and a half ago, and I knew that this was going to come up. So I kind of planned this conversation, and we're talking about, hey, what's your IoT strategy? And they're like, oh, I don't know, but we just don't want another Square to happen to us. Square really, really impacted us as a payment provider, the whole notion of mobile payments. And we have this conversation, it's kind of spinning, and at the end I'm like, hey, I need to go, but have you thought about when machines start making payments? And that blew their minds. And the fact that blew their minds means another Square is going to happen to you because you're not stepping back and really looking at the problem and figuring out a new way to go do business. And so to me, digital transformation, it's kind of stepping out of your own industry, really kind of analyzing things, adopting new ways to market, stop being your own worst enemy in some cases, but then also really taking a people-first approach because that I think is a big part of, we'll probably talk a lot more about that as we go, but it's all of the above, but also great frameworks that they brought up as well.
Okay. We have seen waves in the industry. So about 10 years ago, the large enterprises started talking about cloud transformation. Whether it's CRM in the cloud or even email in the cloud. So now we are talking about IoT and digital transformation. So in your opinion, does IoT come first or the business transformation or the digital strategy or what do you want to achieve comes first? Maybe Andre, let's look at your opinion.
I think there are probably multiple truths here, to be honest. I'm not necessarily, think there's one that needs to come first. However, I don't believe in a company that is just experimenting bottom up eventually without a digital strategy. So to me, that is a clear something that needs to come in time. And especially when you're actually being successful in experimenting and then suddenly you want to scale, you need those foundational capabilities, whether it's connectivity, it's your cloud platform, IoT platform, analytics. You can't just have that, people choosing whatever they want and do it on their own way, left and right in the company. And that's where you need to start making strategic choices of what you find important and including the business models that go with it. So I have examples where we start with a digital strategy. From there on, you go into certain use cases, proving the value and etc. But the other way around exists as well. But at the end of the day, a digital strategy without any execution, experimenting is like having a thought but not walking the talk. So that doesn't make sense as well.
Yeah, let me absolutely agree with you. So I'm director for digital strategy, so I can confirm this is really important.
Yeah.
Because if you do let people just experiment, you will end up with several IoT platforms in one company, in one division, etc. It will be really hard to converge all of this. On the other hand, if you just go top down and define some great vision without actually checking if it's really applicable to your systems, to your manufacturing, to your processes, to skills in your organization, you're also going to fail. So I think it's really great how Andre defined it.
And there's another element. So in my industry, in the manufacturing industry, the biggest challenge on the operations side is to really free up time of people, whether it's an operator, a maintenance engineer. So if people just go and do stuff, there's no strategic decisions to free up time, and it will probably fail. You will never get to the scaling element because most of the companies, through years of operational excellence, they're very lean and mean, and they're super efficient. But there is no time to take out an engineer for a day or an operator or somebody that's working on the operations side. That takes a executive decision to actually define and say, this is the way we want to go. And we're going to make that decision and we're going to actually organize it. Because it's disruptive. In either way, all of our companies we work for, whether it's a bus manufacturing, it's a chemical, bulk chemical, it is more in the aerospace, it is disruptive whatever they will do. And that is something that needs an executive decision underlying it.
Yeah, I mean that plays into the whole component of it. It's the people challenge first, and I agree. Like this kind of stuff starts with a multi-prong approach. Developers want to get to hello world in 10 minutes and start tinkering. I have a lot of sayings, and I joke a lot of IoT projects start with pie in the sky mode, a Raspberry Pi in some public cloud.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because and also pie in the sky because it's still pie in the sky ideas. They don't actually have a business case yet, but and then you want to do the tops down approach. But one of the challenges, as you were saying, is that the previous conversation, IT, OT, convergence, whatnot. It's IT, OT in the line of business. The line of business actually has the most say in many cases, and kind of there's this tops-down scenario. But then a lot of these projects start, with kind of tinkering, often. But even if you want to drive real change, it does need to be a tops-down conversation because it's not even just IT and OT. It's like in OT. The production people have a different, set of needs from the quality people, have a different set of needs from reliability, maintenance, whatever. They're all conflicting. In IT, the PC people don't necessarily get along with the server people, and the networking people. And so it's always about, I don't have the skills, that scares me, that's not my job, I don't have the time.
Yeah. And
so this is why digital transformation is hard and why you have to kind of come about it a different way, in the greater scheme of things. So again, that's why the people part really matters. But I agree, like it's got to be kind of a multi-prong approach. I want to give the hello world to developers in 10 minutes, but I need to also come down from the top side with the outcomes that I'm trying to achieve and a strategy around it. I've had people say, "Oh no, you just have to go after the data scientists." I'm like, no, you have to go after everybody.
Yeah.
So.
And Shyam, what about you? How is it going at Oracle? What's digital transformation aspect for you?
So at Oracle, we came from a software background, from enterprise software perspective, and we look at IoT as the end-to-end journey from the birth of an asset all the way to its use in the field and its service maintenance all the way to retirement. And with that approach, we started with obviously the ERP systems, the MES systems, and then we extended it to build the IoT platform and applications which can talk to the origin of the asset when it is designed, when it is manufactured, to help create what's called the digital thread of the asset. So digital twin is one part which we may probably talk about, which is really useful in modeling the behavior when it is used in field by the owner or operator. But at times you have to solve the problem by knowing the entire lineage of the asset, and that's our approach. And then there is an aspect of manufacturing and use in the field, but what about servicing the physical asset? So that's where field service comes into picture, and as Oracle, we have built solutions to provide, enable the workforce who goes and services these big physical assets in the field. The service industry doesn't need that, but when you are dealing with physical assets, whether it's in factories, whether it's out in the field, the turbines, wind turbines, or oil and gas rigs, you need to enable the field service staff. So our approach is to look at it end to end and sort of software enable it, and then work with other partners, whether it's Dell or others who help to bring the journey start the journey from the edge. So Zoya, your company is part of a big conglomerate, Honeywell, which is in multiple industries. Can you tell us which industry segment are you focusing in from a digital transformation perspective?
So since Garrett Motion is a provider of turbocharging technology, or primary provider of turbocharging technology, we are mostly active in automotive and also partially active in manufacturing because, for example, we do manufacture our own turbochargers. However, we also supply consulting services to our suppliers. And now we are a bit expanding. So since we are looking into cybersecurity offerings for connected vehicles, it's starting to touch out not only classical automotive industry that we are used to work with, but also all other kinds of ecosystem around it. So be it, for instance, fleet managers and other operators, just to give you an example.
So, Andre, are you focusing on certain industry sectors, and can you tell us about some use cases from your industries?
Yeah, sure. So the broad manufacturing industry I work for solely focus on that. Consists, let's say, of chemicals, bulk chemicals, specialty chemicals, and then we have discrete manufacturing, which is a big bucket. It can be, a bus manufacturing company, but also certain subcomponents that goes into bigger systems. The use cases we see, I would say they vary depending very much on the sector you're looking at. If the bulk chemicals, it's very much a transformation on the operations side. Cost is key to them. Most of the time they have 10, 20 clients max. They go out in bulk by carriage. So they want to make sure is that their factories are having an uptime as much as possible and they're efficient as much as possible. So it's really an operation it's really a transformation on the operation side. So we're looking at energy optimization, we're looking at maintenance, all the usual suspects I guess we are pretty much aware of. I must say that the future of energy, the whole circularity and does give actually a new spark into looking what we can do on the energy side, especially with if you get the real-time insights of the price of electricity and how can I actually use that at a certain moment in time instead of producing electricity myself by steam, actually buy it at a cheaper price, for example. It's interesting for those companies where the digital strategy actually shows that they go from a product to a service. It's a major trend in my industry, more on the industrial product side. So I don't sell a product as such anymore, I'm going to sell a service. And that service is by definition connected. That is always the case. And this is a very specific use case. And although it is also then relevant maybe to have an efficient operation, it's not de-emphasized anymore. you really start looking into, okay, what does it mean? Because suddenly I don't just sell and forget. I need to actually monitor consistently 24/7. I need to understand what is in a bus, for example. I need to know all the components and I need to actually monitor them real time. So you have some edge computing in the bus, you know, have connectivity. And it's a major transformation over my clients which need to start really implementing PLM, PDM, but maybe they have it, but then they need to go on a higher maturity level. So what we see is a variety of use cases. There's not a common denominator, I would say. Although everything on the manufacturing side, there's an operations element in it for sure.
So you mentioned about PLM and PDM. So can you, for your audience, tell us what is that and how does the IoT benefit from having a PLM system?
Well, a lot of my clients, when start exploring, they start about the digital twin. What do I need? What is it? And everybody thinks they need a digital twin. That's not the reality, actually, right? So if you want to doing maintenance, you don't need to actually have a digital twin of your factory per se. You can have a couple of data threads, digital threads, and start building an analytical model, optimizing whatever it is. However, if you sell a product and you need to make sure that that product is optimized because suddenly you're responsible for selling a kilometer or a mile as a service, as a bus manufacturing, you need to know whether that engine is going to fail, whether the compressor is going to fail, or something else in that bus. And that means that you need to really start designing that product and understanding all the assets in it, be able to monitor it real time or through a connectivity platform. And that requires PLM, product lifecycle management. It requires PDM as well, where you actually have all the assets in it and you 3D model them actually. And that is a major transformation if it's not already in that company. And actually through that, I see a significant growth in the market and demand for PLM, PDM happening at this moment in time.
Maybe let me add something to this comment because I really like it since we are the supplier for automotive area. It's a very interesting question when you start talking about digital twin of entire assets such as a bus. Since you can imagine in automotive industry, you don't have just one or two or three suppliers, you have hundreds of suppliers in different chains. So suppliers supply suppliers of your suppliers. It's really complicated. So how you are going to make sure that all these elements are covered in a digital twin?
Yeah.
How do you going to make a decision? What kinds of elements do you actually need at all? Do you really need all, only part of it? What kind of standard are you going to use? Is, for example, temperature the same temperature as we are talking about?
Yeah.
There are a lot of interesting questions in this area. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people talk about digital twins and they don't really know what it means. The same thing as like blockchain and other technologies. Like, digital twin, people are like, oh, it's just basically a dashboard, right? No, I mean, it's the physical systems. It's kind of like, how do I compare as designed, as built, and as is, all in real time, and those dynamics coming out of the systems. But interoperability is key because last I checked, most systems are not built by one supplier. They're built by a heterogeneous set of suppliers, and then you get into the systems of systems conversation, et cetera. So this is where interoperability, really matters, and it would be good to talk about that. The interesting thing about as a service, it changes. You articulated really well, like how it kind of changes your mindset. I talk about there's a compressor company that kind of switched over to this model of air as a service. Instead of selling their compressors, they're selling air. But now, if you start offering it as a service, what used to be a profit center to fix broken machines, now becomes a cost center.
Yeah.
And if it's broken, you have no money, no revenue. So it completely changes how you have to do things, and that's why that telemetry and using your own telemetry to learn more about the performance of your things in the field, exactly what he's talking about. It changes how you look at stuff, but it can be very valuable in its own right. So Dell Technologies, we're about infrastructure. We're selling hardware and software infrastructure. Really broad portfolio. So by nature of that, very horizontal in that sense. But we work with a lot of different partners, whether they're ISVs that are specifically focused on different use cases. We work with big SIs, SIs large and small. This market has we saw this like about 4 years ago. Goes vertical before it goes horizontal. You always start with an outcome. The most success that we've had is with very, very small platform players that are laser focused on one use case. I know more than you'd ever want to know about cold chain logistics or monitoring oil well heads or whatever. And so the use cases start with an outcome and then you back into it. We've seen this transition over the past number of years where the big platform players are like, hey, buy my platform, and people are like, I don't know what to do with it. Well, no, it's okay, you'll figure it out. Just buy my platform. It's got to start with that outcome. So we've been focused, but in terms of focus areas, manufacturing is consistently pops up as the top opportunity area. We see a lot of opportunity in retail. Certainly transportation systems. We've steered clear a little bit from healthcare and some of those types of things up front because it's just super complex. But there's a lot of opportunity. The other thing I'll say is, from an edge standpoint, the killer app today is computer vision. So unless you sell connectivity, bandwidth, you do not think it's a good idea to send video data over networks. So we have a big surveillance practice. Cameras are one of the best sensors around. So we do a lot with safety and security, but then you start seeing that transform into more computer vision use cases. Last thing I'll say is, from use cases, so it's all over the place, use case wise. Obviously you're focusing on value, but we often see that when people start with a specific goal in mind, it's not the value that they ultimately end up with, or they kind of stumble into new things if you take a holistic approach. We have a partner that worked with a steel manufacturer, and the steel manufacturer's initial problem was they used more power than the city next to them to produce the steel. And they're like, I just need to save some power, some energy, cut my energy costs. But they went in and they took a holistic approach and they looked at all parts of the business and logistics in and out and all this, and of course the energy utilization. And they saved so much power that they actually started selling, they turned it into a business to buy energy credits and sell them back to the power company, and they turned it into a profit center. So this is talk about digital transformation. It's you got to step back and get out of your own, kind of headspace and look at a problem holistically. And so that's the big thing too. It's, use case is important, of course, but it's also really evaluating the ultimate opportunity.
I agree. And you mentioned interoperability, Jason. I think that's an extremely good point. I think where you see the maturity of this topic in the industry is we're getting to the transformation that includes different parties in a value chain. Example of that bus is interesting. So a public transportation company puts out a tender. You might win it for 3 years, but after 3 years they might select another one. They want to have an open standard in terms of exchange of data. Because that data is relevant for you as selling that service, but it's also relevant for a public transportation company. So I see a big demand in the market to get to that open standard in terms of exchange of data. And I know your company is playing a pivotal role in that. Can you explain a little bit of what Dell is doing there?
Yeah, so great. So IoT, the past 4 or 5 years, since it really became a kind of a buzz topic in about 2014, of course, IoT type solutions have been done a long time. All new markets start with a bunch of people trying to lock everyone in because they think if I can just lock you in, then I can sell your data if you let me. That's been basically kind of the mentality, thinking if I can lock you in. Why do we have so many protocols in IoT and OT world, whatever? We have thousands of protocols and connectivity, ways of connecting because people either didn't think about it, but more so they actually created proprietary protocols to lock you in. But now that it's about the maker movement and the pace of innovation and digital transformation means you need to kind of change how you do business, open really, really matters. So what we started, actually within Dell about 4 years ago, we started a project that turned into the EdgeX Foundry project within Linux Foundation. We figured around the time that project got to be mature, you have to put stuff out into the open community if it's going to be trusted. Think of EdgeX, do for IoT what Android did for mobile. You will never win the standards game with one magical protocol to talk to everything. It will never work. I mean, that's the old standards joke. If we can create one more standard, we'll fix the standards problem. EdgeX is a framework that's take cloud data principles, extend it to the edge, so very, very loosely coupled, flexible. What you might use today might change tomorrow. I don't care what protocol you want to use. You write it in your way. Plug it into this open API, and then any cloud stack on top can talk to that. So it's kind of like this universal translator. Launched it in April 2017. It kind of slowly grew in adoption, downloads and whatnot for about 2 years as the whole code base matured, and it went 1.0 2 months ago. It just hit 1 million total microservice downloads, and half of that was in the past 2 months. So basically, I look at it as like the growth curve is, here is 2 years of everyone feeling a lot of pain realizing, oh man, this is really hard. We need actual interoperability. Imagine the internet if one company owned the internet. We need open interoperability, and then the past couple months, when you start seeing great names like AWS and IBM and HP and other players starting to kind of adopt, Intel's been a great partner in this for quite a while. We're working with ARM and a bunch of players. That open interoperability is that first step. Yes, you should always start small in use cases, but if you want to scale to the real potential, systems of systems, digital twins that actually are comprised of lots of different components, you have to have interoperability. And then the next big conversation is about how do you drive trust at scale. I mean, Don was mentioning that last one as well. I'm sure we'll get into that, but I don't want to hog the mic here. So.
Okay. Maybe at this stage we'll open up for about 2 questions from the audience, if there are any, before we wrap up. Okay, we'll give you some time to think of questions. So you talked a lot about edge, and yesterday in my panel we talked about 5G. So the promise of 5G is you can magically put everything to the cloud because you will have unlimited bandwidth, whereas edge focuses on trying to localize a lot of the data and make sense there. So how do you see emergence of 5G playing with the sort of emergence of edge analytics?
So I get asked this question often. So put it a different way, will 5G just make this conversation of edge computing a short-lived conversation? First off, and I say this all the time in different blogs and whatnot, if you've ever seen the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, the dad sprays Windex on everything. Oh, you got a paper cut? Okay, just put some Windex on it, you're fine. 5G, AI, blockchain, AR, all these different technologies, they're all Windexes of technologies. People talk about them like they're going to solve everything. 5G is very important. All these technologies are important, but it's you've got to kind of break down the problem. 5G, super fast, super low latency, high bandwidth, you get it. We're a long time away from pervasive 5G. You're going to start seeing small cells, here more than later. But bandwidth always comes with a cost. So just because you can pump a bunch of data really fast to backend networks doesn't mean you should. And IoT represents a lot more devices on networks. There's just so much more data out there. You're still going to have distributed compute. You're still going to have edge compute. Is the cloud going away? No. Is 5G really important? Yes. But I don't care how many 9s you have on your reliability. You do not deploy your airbag from the cloud. You do not do certain things. If you're a nuclear plant, you do not connect up, just randomly to wide area networks. And then just the fact that there's too much data in general. Is it going to create new experiences? Yeah. It's going to be great new experiences, augmented reality, whatever. The way I liken it to is when people move to the suburbs around a city, because it gets too congested, then people build more freeways. And when more freeways come in, then more people move into town, and then you get more traffic. And so 5G is going to create more of a pipe, but you're also going to elevate all the experiences, and then you're going to have the same problem to deal with. So you're still going to need edge computing.
I agree, and I think also cost of storage that you mentioned. The more data you produce, the more data you can push up the pipeline. Since most of let's say people organizations don't know what to do with this data, so they just store it for later use cases. It's having a huge cost and impact on the cost. So.
Any questions from the audience?
Still no questions?
Oh,
come on.
Was there a hand? No, okay. Zaya, what do you see as the blockers for digital transformation from your vantage point?
Okay, so I would say for automotive, we already touched some of the blockers. It's, of course, exploding complexity of the vehicles. So you have vehicles that are becoming now more software factories than hardware assets. So how you're going to control and integrate all the systems, how you're going to ensure they're safe, how you're going to ensure they're cyber secure, for example. The second one is exploding complexity of the ecosystem as such, because we don't speak only about manufacturers of the car in our case, or tractor or bus. We are talking about EV charging stations, we are talking about grid network providers who need to ensure EV charging stations work, or maybe hydrogen providers, who knows what's going to come. So how we are going to integrate all of this ecosystem to play as one. And thirdly, I would say it's really cybersecurity, because at least to my personal opinion, it's still not treated on equal grade of importance. But since you have so much software already, we really need to start taking care of it, and if you want to be successful in the future with that. So at least this is from my perspective.
Andre, what kind of blockers are you seeing?
So we talked about the availability of people on the operations side, but even though if they're available and in the first phase might be okay with support of us, but eventually what we need is a lot of digital capability in the company. So I think reskilling people that have been doing their job for 20, 25, 30 years, suddenly that need to incorporate digital tasks of working in a digital manner, regardless of where you are in the company. I think that's a huge challenge for all our clients at this moment in time. And we call it the future of work. So this whole reskilling is something that we bring under the attention, because after they have understood the value and they started, this will take years and this will be ongoing forever. So that's one theme, and it's a difficult one to tackle and to take forward. I'm not saying it's a blocker, but it's a challenge, I would say. The other one is that they need to change their organization as well. So they need to get into a digital operating model. Take any example you want, even if it's just on your operations side, the whole way you get in use cases, demand into your IT, the whole agile way of thinking, it's a different way of working, and it requires a transformation and a change in your company.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, well, so top challenges, roadblocks for digital transformation. Number one is always business case. Is there a reason to do it? Or how am I going to transform? Number two, it's people. Stakeholder complexity, as I would call it. And a lot of the things that you were talking about. Then you have the fragmentation problem. And IoT as a workload, and of course, digital transformation isn't just about IoT, but IoT is super fragmented for all the reasons we've kind of talked about, and so that's why we've tackled that kind of with projects like EdgeX, and broadly speaking, LF Edge is a broader umbrella organization within Linux Foundation. Took an open source strategy, because open source, I can run code, I can't run a document, and so I can run code and start to collaborate with a community and drive change faster and consolidation. The next problem, security is definitely a big one. I think security is broadly speaking, it depends on the industry. Of course, if you're in transportation systems and where bad things happen if there's a breach. Security I put forth because if you don't solve problems 1 through 3, you're not doing anything at scale, so you don't really have a security problem. And also we have to separate out security challenges from was any security applied versus can you actually secure it? Most of the breaches you hear about around IoT, especially the consumer ones, almost all of them, were because security wasn't applied. The DDoS attack that took down the network, in the U.S., so the internet up in the Northeast a few years ago, it was like under 20 combinations of usernames and passwords got into those millions of cameras that did a focus attack on the network. That's like just bad practices. There's a lot of examples out there, so we have to separate that out, and I think usability matters. But the next big conversation, you're seeing it a lot around the floor. The previous panel, as I mentioned, Don did a great job talking about it. The next big conversation is around trust, and it actually goes back to the people part. Actually, yesterday, Monday, like we did with EdgeX, from a Dell Technology standpoint, we just donated or launched a project with a number of other big names around this notion of these trust fabrics. So a lot of people are like, oh, just throw blockchain on it and that solves all your problems. One of the Windexes of technology, which of course blockchain is important, but there's challenges. A trust fabric, as we're defining it as this next big industry conversation, is take a layered approach, so defense in depth, but in this case, it's how do I deliver data from devices to applications with measurable confidence. If I want to do digital twin, if I want to scale across systems, a smart city, or crossover into the home from brick and mortar and web and all this stuff, all these things interconnected, it won't work if we don't have open interoperability. Again, imagine the internet, if one company on the internet, good luck. All digital transformation conversations devolve often into a debate over who owns the data. How do you break the cycle of a handful of companies owning all of the data is you make it to where nobody owns the trust. And so you decentralize it and you collaborate on frameworks that bind together all of these different things. I won't go into all the technical details, but a holistic model. So this project that you can learn more at the LF Edge booth that we just announced. ARM, IBM, Unisys, big names. OSI Soft in the manufacturing world, backing it. Mobile EdgeX from the telco world. A bunch of really good names. Budding up with the Trusted IoT Alliance. So it's like people kind of coming together because the next big conversation is around how do I build intrinsic trust into to data, have that provenance with the data, follow the data. Because if you want to flow through a factory to different suppliers, into a supply chain, into a city, into the home, into all these other places, you cannot do it by building relationships one by one. The zero trust model is this model where you basically say, hey, trust nobody and whitelist one by one. That's like trying to build massively scalable business relationships by taking people out to dinner one at a time. It doesn't work. The model that we're building with, it's called Project Alvarium, that's, it's just kind of very new, is let's change it to where you attach the confidence to the data, and then as it flows across these trust fabrics, then it basically says, hey, this is how I was created, this is where I've been, this is how confident you can be in this data, and do you want to buy me, do you want to act on me, or you don't even know about me because this is my IP, and it's all based on terms that, as an end user, your privacy that you set terms, and then you send data off into the ether, and you could collect checks from total strangers. This is scale. So that's longer term stuff, but we think security is the next big conversation. And security and trust.
Maybe even data awareness. I guess many organizations don't even realize what kind of data they can be producing or what they shall be producing, and so what's the value of that. And I think it's an instinctive decision for some to say, okay, I'm going to control all the data. I have heard it's going to be the gold of tomorrow, so I'm going to have a great business model on it, and this is why I better keep as much as I can and produce as much as I can. So I think it's also a bit of this educational part to it.
Yeah, it's a bit counterintuitive, but I think that you need to set the data free and use technology to bring checks back from strangers.
So Andrew, you want to leave our audience with some closing thoughts, some takeaways?
We're speaking about digital transformation, and it clearly seems there are different forms and types of digital transformation, from the boundaries of a company to things happening in smart cities, which compromises a lot of different actors, and there's a variety of complexity. But I think the key notion to me is that people are key, and it's interesting to see that even sometimes on the board level, I find it difficult to grasp the challenge and the opportunity of what digital means. But it starts there, and then it trickles down into the organization. And people is going to be central. And the way I see it is that there are different groups. There's a group that will not grasp the notion of what it means, and you have to deal with it. They will eventually, have to stop doing what they do. They will leave the company, or you have to settle it. There's a group that doesn't want to, and hopefully you can take a part of that group into the future of your company. And then there's a group that can. But just imagine that applies to every country, every company in the world. We have an interesting challenge at hand of a group that is potentially left out of this. And I think that's one of the challenges we see going forward in what's, if we call this digital transformation. How do we deal with the people issue? And how do we actually manage that reskilling and change going forward? And I think we're just started. We're at the brink of this major change in the world, and it's going to be interesting for the years to come, for sure.
It's really great comment.
Any closing thoughts?
Well, let me say on my side, I would say, of course, this was great comment. Thank you. I also like the comment about interoperability. I believe in most industries it's going to be their answer, or it's the way to go. So one has to start discussing about the way open and trustful cooperation happens. Still is protecting own IP, etc., of course, but I believe without clearly defined standards, it's not going to move forward. So I would add from my side on that.
Yeah, the way I summarize it, so you need a multi-cloud strategy that starts with an open, trusted edge. All data is created, whether it's things or people, at the edge. You got to collaborate on just enough plumbing to make kind of that open interoperability work. It's not going to be solved with one magical protocol. You have to do it through these frameworks that bind together messy stuff. And then from there, it's focus on outcomes, focus on your people, work with the people stuff. But when you have consistent infrastructure and kind of open foundations, and you start building in the trust elements, that actually helps with the people part. And then you just need smart people that know about their domains, because it's about domain knowledge in the end. I say you need one cake with lots of flavors of icing and sprinkles. And we don't need 100 different platforms for 100 different use cases. It's not valuable. We need to have more consistent foundation and then build all the value around it.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for staying with us right before the lunch. Please join me in thanking our panel.